Let me just find it. I kind of just put my finger down and picked a story. It's Ib and Little Christina. I think Ib is a pretty good name, just IB. But it's story number 75, page 469. So let's jump ahead. Going in to Story Window's future. Yeah.
I read it. I think I'm the dessert section.
Okay. Ib and Little Christina. There is a river in Denmark called the River of the Gods, the Gudena, and not far from its shores, as it flows through the forest of Silkeborg. Probably going to say some things wrong, so if anyone wants to tell me how to actually say these things, feel free. I love that. Rises a ridge on the west side of which was situated a small farm. In fact, it is still there. Even when the rye and barley stand high in the fields, you can see the sandy soil beneath the grain, and the harvest is always meager. This story takes place some years ago, and the farmer who tilled it then had 3 sheep, a pig, and 2 oxen. He could have kept a couple of horses, but he felt as most farmers in that area did. Horses eat up their profits themselves. Jeppe was the farmer's name. He farmed in the summer and carved wooden shoes in the winter. He was a skillful carver, but he had a younger helper who was even better than he was and understood how to make clogs so that they were strong and yet not heavy and shapeless. They also made other household wares which fetched a good price. Although Jeppe and his family were not rich, no one in that district would have called them poor. Little Ib was 7 years old. He was an only child, and he lived like he liked to sit by his father and watch him carve. The boy whittled sticks, and sometimes he cut his fingers. One day he did manage to carve 2 little objects that looked like a pair of tiny wooden shoes. These he wanted to give to Christina, the daughter of the bargeman, who lived in a cottage on the heath. The little girl was very beautiful and so delicate that she did not look at all like a bargeman's daughter. Had she had clothes to match the loveliness that God had given her, then no one would have guessed that she had been born in a poor cottage on the lonely heath. Her father was a widower who made his living by transporting lumber from the woods down to the locks of Silkeborg. Sometimes he would even sail as far as the Randers with his barge. As there was no one at home to take care of little Christina. She was a year younger than Ib. She was always with her father, except on his journeys to Randers. Then her father would bring her to Jeppe's house to stay. Ib and little Christina never fought, neither when they played nor at table. They would play in the sand, pretend they were making a little garden, or just tumble about. One day they ventured as far as the top of the ridge beyond which was the forest. They found the nest of a snipe with eggs in it. That had been a very exciting adventure. Ib had never been on the heath, nor had he ever sailed with a barge down the river and through the lakes. But one day, Christina's father invited him on a trip, and his parents gave their consent. The evening before they were set out, the bargeman came to fetch him, and he spent the night in the little cottage on the heath. Early the next morning, the children were sitting on top of the wood pile in the barge, eating bread and raspberries. Christina's father and his helper were pulling the barge down the river. They were following the current, so they sailed along at a good speed. One after another they sailed through the lakes. Every time they entered one, Ib was sure that the river had ended, for bulrushes, reeds, and trees seemed to enclose the lake, but finally a narrow opening would appear that they could sail through. Sometimes the trees leaning out over the narrow river would almost hinder their passing, but always the barge sailed on. Some of the oak trees had naked branches that had lost all their bark and looked as if they had rolled up their sleeves to show their withered old arms. Many of the old alder trees had loosened themselves from the banks and now stood like little islets. That doesn't sound right. To the river. White and yellow water lilies floated amid their big green leaves. It certainly was a lovely trip. At last they came to the locks where eels were caught and shipped as far away as Copenhagen. The water rushed over the lock and fell as a waterfall on the other side, and that was something for Ib and little Christina to look at. At that time, no factory or town had been built there yet. There was only the old farm on which not many people lived. The water rushing over the lock and the cry of the wild ducks were the only sounds to be heard. The lumber was loaded onto a bigger barge, and Christina's father bought a little newly slaughtered pig and some eels. Then they were ready for homeward journey. The pig and the eels were put into the basket. Now they had the current against them, but not the wind. So they hoisted a sail, and that was as good as having 2 horses pull the barge. When they reached the part of the forest where the bargeman's helper lived, they moored the barge at the bank. Christina's father told the children to stay on board and not to touch anything, while he accompanied his young helper to his home. The bargeman said that he would be back very soon. The children obeyed him at first, but not for long. They had to peep into the basket that contained the eels and the pig. They took the little pig out, and when they both tried to hold it at once, it fell overboard and the little dead animal floated away with the current. It was a terrible calamity. Ib leaped to the shore, and soon Christina followed him. "Take me with you," she cried. They ran in among the trees, and within a few minutes the barge and the river disappeared. From their view, Christina fell and began to cry. But Ib calmed her. "The house is right over there. Come along," he said. But the house was not right over there, and soon the 2 children were lost. They walked on and on. The dried leaves rustled and dead branches broke with cracking sound as they stepped on them. Someone was shouting far away. The children stopped to listen, but then they heard the hoarse, frightening cry of an eagle, and they ran. A little while later, they came upon a blueberry patch covered with the most delicious, large, ripe berries. They were so tempting that they had to sit down and eat them. Their cheeks and lips were stained deep blue. Again they heard someone shouting. "We will get spanked because of the pig," observed little Christina. "Let us go home to my parents," said Ib, who was certain that Christina was right. "It is not far from here." The children walked on, and finally they came to a road, but it did not lead home. It began to grow dark, and they were frightened. The terrible stillness of the forest was broken by the terrifying hooting of owls and the cries of other birds that they did not know. Christina cried and Ib cried. They wept for an hour or more before they both lay down under some bushes and fell asleep. The sun was already high in the sky when they awoke, but they were very cold. They could see the sun shining on top of a nearby hill. Up there they would be able to get warm, and Ib hoped that he would be able to see his home, but they were in another part of the forest, far away from the little farm. When they climbed the hill, they found a little pool, and where the sun's rays fell on the water, they could see the fishes swimming. Such a sight they had never seen before. A few minutes later, they found some hazelnut bushes, and their fears were forgotten. They cracked the nuts and ate them. Although they were far from ripe, they already had little kernels. Then something terribly frightening happened. A tall woman stepped out from behind the bushes. Her face was brown and her hair was black. She carried a bundle on her back and a big strong cane in her hands. She was a gypsy. At first the children could not understand what she said. She took 3 nuts out of her apron pocket and told them that they were wishing nuts, and that each of them contained something marvelous. Ib looked at the woman for a long time. Her expression seemed kind. He asked her if he could have her wishing nuts, and she gave them to him. Then she picked a whole pocketful of nuts from the bushes for herself. The 2 children stared, wide-eyed, at the wishing nuts. "Is there a carriage and horses in one of them?" asked Ib. "In that one there is a golden carriage with golden horses," answered the woman, and pointed to one of the nuts in the boy's hand. Give it to me, then," begged little Christina, and Ib gave it to her. "Is there a pretty little necklace like the one Christina is wearing in this one?" demanded Ib. "There are 10 necklaces," said the woman, "and dresses, stockings, and hats." "Then I want that one too," shouted little Christina, and Ib gave it to her. The 3rd nut was a little black one. "That one you can keep," said Christina. "It is a pretty one too." "And what is in that?" asked Ib. "What is best for you," said the gypsy. Ib kept the nut. The gypsy woman said that she would show them the way home, but she led them astray, sending them in the opposite direction from the one they should have gone. But one cannot accuse her of trying to steal the children, and she might have acted in good faith. In the middle of the forest they met Chris the forester. He knew Ib, and he took the children home. Both the bargeman and Ib's parents had been so upset that the children were forgiven, though they deserved a spanking, not only for having let the pig fall into the water, but also for running away. That evening Christina and her father had returned to their home on the heath. Ib took out the one nut that contained what was best for him. He placed it between the door and its casing and cracked it by closing the door. There was no kernel in it, just some black dirt. It was worm-eaten. "I thought so." Ib was not surprised. How could there be room in a little nut for what was best? Christina would get no carriage or dresses out of her nuts either, Ib muttered. Winter came, and the years passed by. Finally, Ib was old enough to be confirmed. Every Sunday that spring he walked the many miles to the church to receive religious instruction. One day the bargeman came by. He had news to tell. Little Christina was old enough to earn her own keep, and he had found her a good position in the family of a wealthy innkeeper near Herning. She was to help in the house, and they would see to it that she was confirmed. Ib and little Christina said goodbye to each other. The little sweethearts, they were called. Christina showed Ib the 2 little wishing nuts he had given her, and which he had received from this gypsy that day in the forest. And she told him that the little pair of wooden shoes that he had cut for her were in the bottom of the chest in which she had packed for her clothes. Then they parted. Ib was confirmed, but continued living at home, for his father had died, and he had to help his mother. He had become as good a carver of wooden shoes as his father had been, and in the summer he took good care of their little farm. Not often did they hear from Christina, but the news that they did get was always good. She wrote to her father about her confirmation, and the letter was filled with descriptions of the new clothes she had received from her mistress. The next spring, on a particularly beautiful day, someone knocked on the door of the little farm. It was the bargeman and Christina. She had been offered a ride in a carriage as far as Thame and back. This had been an opportunity to come home for a visit. Beautiful she was, and her clothes were as elegant as any lady's. Ib, who was wearing his work clothes, could hardly utter a word. He took her hand and held it tightly, but his tongue was all tied up in knots. Christina's wasn't. She talked and talked. There was so much to tell, and she kissed Ib boldly on the mouth. "Don't you know me any more?" she asked. All he could manage to reply, even though they were alone together, was, "You have become a fine lady, and I am so so coarse. What? But oh, Christina, how I have thought about you and of the time when we were children together. Arm in arm, they walked up to the top of the ridge. From there they could see the river and as far as the heath, where Christina's father lived. Ib did not say a word, but as they were returning and Ib was to go to his home and Christina to her father's, Ib realized how very much he wanted Christina to be his wife. Hadn't they been called sweethearts since they were little children? Now he knew that he had always expected that one day they would marry, and he felt as though they were engaged, though neither of them had ever spoken a word about it. Christina could only stay a few hours because she had to be in Tem early the following morning, when the carriage departed that would take her back to the inn at Herning. Ib and the bargeman accompanied her to Tem. It was a lovely night. The moon was full. All the way Ib held Christina's hand, and when they finally arrived at their destination, he did not want to let go of it. He had great difficulty saying what anyone could have read in his eyes. He spoke only a few words, but every one of them came from his heart. If you have not become used to finer things than I can give you, and if you will be satisfied with living in my mother's house with me as your husband, then I think the two of us should become man and wife. But I will not hurry you. Yes, let us wait a little while, Ib, replied Christina, and pressed his hand. Then he kissed her on the mouth. I trust you, Ib, she said, and I think that I love you, but I would like to have time to think about it. They parted, and Ib told the bargeman that he and Christina were as good as engaged. Christina's father was pleased and not surprised. Although he spent the night at Ib's home, they did not talk any more about it. My foot is falling asleep. Yeah. Okay. So we are reading Ib and Little Christina by Hans Christian Andersen. If you're just tuning in, a year went by. 2 letters had passed between Ib and Christina, and both of them had been signed, yours unto death. Then one day the bargeman arrived. He had greetings from Christina. That was easy enough to say. What followed was more difficult, and he took his time to saying it. Everything went well for Christina, more than well. But then she was a good girl. The innkeeper's son had been home on a visit. He had a good job in an office in Copenhagen. He had taken a liking to Christina, and she to him. His parents were not against them marrying, but Christina felt that she had given Ib her word, and therefore she was going to say no, even though such a marriage would be fortunate for a poor girl like herself, concluded the bargeman. At first Ib did not say a word, but his face turned as white as a newly washed sheet. He shook his head and then mumbled, I would not wish Christina to say no to good fortune for my sake. Write her a few words about it, urged the bargeman. Ib wrote, but every time he had written a sentence he crossed it out again. All the words seemed wrong to him. Many pages he tore up, but by morning the letter to little Christina was finished. Here it is. I have read the letter that you wrote to your father. In it you say that everything goes well for you and that you have an opportunity for bettering yourself. Ask your own heart, Christina. If you want to marry me, then remember that I am poor. Do not consider me or my feelings, but only yourself. You are not bound to me. Should you feel that you have given me your promise, then I release you from it. May all the happiness in the world be yours, Christina. God may console my heart. Ever your devoted friend, Ib. The letter was sent, and Christina received it. A few months later, the bonds were ready in the little church on the heath, and in the big church in Copenhagen. The bridegroom was too busy with his affairs to be able to travel to Jutland. Christina journeyed with her future mother-in-law to the capital, where the young people were to live. Christina had arranged to meet her father in the little village of Funder. which was on the main highway to the south. There they said goodbye to each other. Every once in a while, someone would speak about Christina when Ib was present, but Ib himself never mentioned her. He had become so silent, so pensive, he often thought about the nuts that the gypsy woman had given them. Now Christina had got her carriage and all the dresses she could wish for. Over across the water in the king's city, Copenhagen, the wishing nuts had proven themselves. His nut had been filled with black earth, and the gypsy had said that that was best for him. Now he understood what she had meant. The dark grave was best for him. Years went by, not many, but to Ib they seemed long. The old innkeeper and his wife died, and their son inherited their wealth, several thousand silver crowns. Now certainly Christina could have her golden carriage and even more dresses than she ever could wear. Then 2 years passed, during which not even the bargeman received any letters from Christina. Finally, one came. It was not a happy one. Poor Christina, neither she nor her husband had been able to handle the sudden richness. It had not been a blessing, for they had not earned it themselves. The heather bloomed and withered, and many a snowstorm swept across the heath and up over the ridge that protected Ib's little farmhouse. Spring came, and Ib was plowing the meager fields. Suddenly he felt the plow shake as if it had hit a stone. Something black-shaped, like a wood shaving, stuck up from the earth. Ib picked it up. It was metal, and where the plowshare had cut into it, it shone. It was a heavy arm ring of gold from heathen times. The Viking grave had long ago been leveled. Now its treasure had been found. Ib showed it to the minister, who admired it and told him to take it to the district commissioner. The official sent a report to Copenhagen and advised Ib to deliver the golden arm ring to the museum himself. You have found in the earth the finest treasure. The best that could be found, he said. The best, thought Ib, the best for me. And found in the earth the gypsy woman was right. My wishing nut, too, has proven true. Ib sailed from Aarhus to the capital, and since he had never sailed before except with the bargemen up and down the river Gudena, it felt like an ocean journey. In Copenhagen he received the gold value of the arm ring, 600 silver crowns. Now Ib, who knew so well the forest and the heath, took a walk along the endless streets lined with stone buildings of the city. The evening before he was to sail back, he lost his way. When he was out walking, and ended in one of the poorest quarters of the city, called Christina's Harbor. It was late, and the street was deserted. He noticed a little child coming out of one of the most dilapidated of the houses, and he asked her for directions. The little girl looked up at him. She was crying and said nothing. He asked her what was the matter, and she answered, but he could not understand her. They were standing under a street lamp. Ib looked down at the child. The light was shining on her face. How strange. He saw with wonder that she looked exactly as Christina had when she was a child. He followed the little girl into a miserable house and up the worn, rickety stairs to the garret. They entered a little room right under the roof. The air was foul and it was dark. Ib struck a match. Over in a corner stood a bed. In it lay a woman, the little girl's mother. "Can I help you?" asked Ib. "This little girl found me down in the street, but I am a stranger to the city myself. Can I call the neighbors?" He stepped closer to the bed and looked down at the woman. It was Christina. At home he had not heard her name mentioned in years, because everyone knew that Ib did not like to be reminded of her. Besides, all the rumors had been unpleasant. It was said that the inherited money had made her husband lose his common sense. He had given up his good position, and they had traveled in foreign countries. When they returned, they had lived high and got into debt rather than curtail the luxuriousness of their way of life. It was the old story of the cart going down the hill so fast that it finally overturned. The many merry friends who had dined at their table when the wealth decked it now felt no pity. They said he deserved his fate and he had acted like a madman. One morning the body of Christina's husband had been found in a canal near the harbor. Christina had been pregnant then. Her child, conceived in wealth, was born in poverty. The baby had only lived a few weeks. Now Christina lay ill to death, in a garret room more naked and bare than the one she had known as a child on the heath. And now, when she had known luxury, she could not bear her poverty, her wretchedness. The little girl who had brought Ib to her was her daughter, her older and only living child. Her name, too, was Christina. "I'm afraid that I am dying," she mumbled. "What will happen to my child? Where in the world can she find a home?" Ib lit another match and found a stump of a candle. Its little flame lighted up the dismal chamber. Ib looked at the little girl and was again reminded of Christina, as she had looked as a child. For her sake, he would take the little girl, bring her up, and be kind to her. The dying woman looked up at him. The pupils of her eyes grew larger and larger. Did she recognize him? Ib never knew, for she never spoke again. We were back in the forest near the River of the Gods, as it is called. Not far from the heath. It is fall. The western storms have started. The wind is blowing the leaves of the trees. In the bargeman's hut, strangers are living. Inside the little farmhouse, so snugly protected from the wind by the ridge, the stove is burning. It is as warm and comfortable as if it were summer. Sunshine is here, the kind that shines from a child's eyes. Though it is October, the lark still sings in the little girl's laughter, her life's gaiety, and winter is far away. Little Christina is sitting on Ib's knee. He is both father and mother to her. Her real parents have disappeared as dreams do to a grown-up. The little farmhouse is cozy and neat. The girl's mother sleeps in the churchyard for the poor in Copenhagen. They say that Ib has a tidy sum put away, gold from the earth. He is rich and he has his little Christina. The end. That was Ib and Little Christina by Hans Christian Andersen. Savings are still here. Wednesday we're going to read The Little Match Girl. And then we'll play it by ear. We'll see when we should read or not. I had a necklace on and it broke. And it slid all the way down my clothes. Let me pull it out. Kind of sat on it the whole time. Well, it didn't really break. Looks like an angry swallow. It's probably pretty old. I know it's old, but what'd you guys think about? You ate 2 sandwiches. I scarfed down food right before, up until the dot. I probably have food in my teeth. What did you think of the story? I thought it was a little bit of a bummer. But I liked it. It was good. I was in the middle of watching... Dr. Sleep, which I really wanted to check out for months. Not me. I lost 3 pounds already in a couple days because I think I've been stressed out and been running a little, doing some light exercise, and I guess I'm just not snacking as much because I'm just stressed. And I'm also not drinking as much. I don't really want to lose weight right now. But anyway, I forgot what I was talking about. We're going to read again on Wednesday. And we'll take from there. But I tried to watch Doctor Sleep. It came out a few months ago. I think it came out in 2019. And I've been wanting to see it for a while, but I just never got around to it. Doctor Sueño. And I just like... Oh, well, I was watching the movie and it's like a little cheesy and I could see that, but I was enjoying it. I don't know. I'm pretty easy to please when it comes to that stuff. And, I don't know, when... I usually love horror films and it's my go-to, but lately when something really stressful happens, I'm surprised. I kind of have to turn it off and I just can't watch, and I have to watch really sappy stuff. Like really, like Full House. I need to watch that stuff. But yeah, Doctor Sleep, it was getting me interested. The villain is pretty hilarious. It's like if the villain were from a Free People store. They have some pretty great wardrobe going on. But when it comes to like child abduction and stuff like that, it kind of really, I couldn't go on. And I rented it, so I know I should put it on right after this, but I'm kind of dreading it at the same time. Yeah, that's triggering too. Top hats. Yeah, helping old people pass. That's another thing that's in the film. It's a continuation of The Shining, in case you don't know. That's what Dr. Sleep is. If you've seen The Shining with Jack Nicholson, picks up with, what's his name? Danny Torrance, the little kid. Picks up when he's an adult. The show Minute, they have some new actors play Danny, and I can't remember anyone's name right now. His mother, who's amazing, but isn't doing so well anymore. But yeah, so it was a continuation of Danny and The Shining and some other people that have The Shining, and he connects with them. So how are y'all feeling? You feel very informed? I feel like I've been reposting a lot of stuff on my Instagram, but I'm sure everybody is just reading the news and getting hit in the face with the stuff nonstop. So maybe that's enough. But I feel pretty stressed out from it all. Our world is very small. It's really hitting me how small it is and how quickly we can reach each other. I don't know if the world has gotten smaller. Yeah. Every day is getting a little worse, but it also feel like maybe some people are getting it. Oh, I should talk about this. So I kind of always practice good hygiene because of the drug that I've been taking for years for a while now. I don't know how many years. Probably like 5 years. I've been on this drug that is fatal when if I catch something called JC virus, which lives in I think it's like 50% of the population, and it just is dormant in most people. It doesn't give you any symptoms or anything. It just lives in you. And my neurologist was starting to think that they're thinking that it's transmitted by pee. So, being in New York City, being on the subway and everything, I would just always, first thing when I enter anywhere and I'm going to hang out for a bit, I just automatically wash my hands. And I don't usually go crazy with hand sanitizer, but if I was like on the subway or something like that, then I would. Hand sanitizer, but always washing the hands. But pee. for me, and this is, 24/7 worry. This never goes away. If I get blood tests like every 3 months to make sure I don't have JC virus. They don't understand that virus, and they don't know how we get it, but they're thinking pee. So when people pee and don't wash their hands, you could be giving somebody JC virus and they could be on a drug. And then if I get the blood test and they find out that I have picked up JC virus, then I have to stop taking my really great drug that has been helping me and making me feel like a normal person the last couple of years and helping me to get back out and play shows and tour and everything again. So it would be a bummer to not have to be on that. And also, you can die. So if you get JC virus and it's really bad and I'm on the drug that I'm on and I don't catch it in time, I could die. So people should just, continue to wash their hands even after this is all over. Because there's a lot of us that, I don't even know. There's a lot of us that have to just be careful about all, we all have our own things. I have to get that drug injected, or not injected, I should say, infused at a treatment center with other chemo patients. And you pretty much sit in a big lazy boy for about an hour, and then you have an IV drip into your vein for about an hour, and you slowly get your drug. So I'm a little worried about having to do that. I have to go back in about 2 weeks to do that. And it's just, it's a big open room with a bunch of nurses that have to hop between patients. And I feel like everyone else in that room mostly is getting chemo. I feel like they're higher risk than I am. But my white blood cells are pretty good right now, and I've been exercising, so I think I'm going to be okay if I get something. And I've just been taking my vitamins and everything. But my immune system has been really good. I haven't been sick in a whole year now, which is crazy. But that's also because I'm self-employed now, and I don't have to worry about office. I would get sick if someone just showed up to work because they had to work and make that money and pay the rent. Then I would just catch it and just burn through my sick days, and I would lose money eventually because I would just catch everything that everybody got. But I usually would beat it. So I'm not too worried. I'm not that old. I'm 32. So I'm really worried about everyone else. I just can't look at my mom's face without yeah, they just say people on the front lines get it the worst for some reason, because I guess they think that it's because they're just being overexposed to it and on low sleep, and that stuff is stressful for me. Okay, I'm going to finish this drink and maybe finish my Dr. Sueño rental. And I'll check back in with everybody on Wednesday. Oh, and did I say what we're reading? We're reading The Little Match Girl, which I hear is a sad one. Sorry. What are some happy stories? where are the... I can look up some happiness for y'all if you know any. I don't know. Okay, y'all. Good night, good evening, good morning. Be well.